Did you used to climb? Did you used to be into climbing?
I did. I did, yeah.
Okay, all right. We haven't talked about the. I mean, I climb all the time.
Oh, yeah?
That's an interesting one. Okay, so this is the new version of the weekly Strength Club podcast. Normally, me and Chase will do like a Q&A. We'll cover some more specific topics. We kind of realized that we have a wealth of very interesting clients who have interesting jobs. So this is the first episode of the Cool Guy interview series. I'm here with Ben. Do you prefer Ben or Benny?
Benny is fine.
Benny is fine,
Benny,
and
Ben, whatever. I like that
no
I'm the
last
cool guy
name.
too.
Yes, this is the Cool Guy interview series, so it's very fitting. But yeah, so Ben, you're a Boston police officer
Uh-huh. That's right.
who is a BJJ brown, purple, black belt. Which one is it again?
I'm a blue belt. Blue
You're a
belt.
blue belt. He's a BJJ blue belt who
Yep.
used to rock climb, who is also sometimes he casually calls himself a hostage negotiator.
That's true. Also
So
true.
it is very interesting. This is a fitting first guy cool guy interview. But yeah, so basically Benny and I are going to talk about how he got into starting strength, how he got into lifting, how he found all these things, how it helps his policing, how it hurts his policing possibly, and then just kind of like. I'm not sure how much you can talk about this. I guess this is a relevant question we had here. Like current state of policing, what you're allowed to talk about, you as like an agent of like the executive branch for the Boston city of Boston, like what are you allowed to say about these things? Are you allowed to express your opinions on current happenings, state of policing? How does that work?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty comfortable talking about this stuff. I think I would have to put a asterisk out there at the beginning that like I don't speak for the Boston police. Like I am
Yeah,
not, like I am not the conduit for administration or anything like that. If any questions that you ask me would be my opinion alone. I could talk about my experience. I have no problem with that. But like I'm not like a representative of them for them.
perfect. Okay, great. Yeah,
If,
because I was
if
wondering,
that's
I was like,
okay.
man, I was like, I
Yeah.
had all these questions that I wonder if he's going to be like, I can't talk about that.
Oh,
Fuck.
I'm pretty much an open
Uh,
book when it comes to that stuff. Yeah, I think it's good to be as transparent as possible and to talk
yeah.
about policy and how policy affects us, like when we're out there working and responding to calls. A lot of people don't understand what's happening behind the scenes,
Hmm.
and so anytime I have an opportunity for somebody who's like open-minded, ask questions, I have no problem talking about that stuff.
That's great, man. Okay, so
Yeah.
I guess we'll just go through this. We can talk about lifting, PT for police officers, what the current climate of that is like. We can talk about grappling and what learning to fight is like.
Uh-huh.
Job stories. We could do some form checks, or we could talk policing issues, which is probably just going to be a me thing. I'm very interested in that. I'm sure the people who are listening to this show for lifting related advice are not. Which one of these sounds the most interesting to you?
I think it all sounds interesting. I don't know. Why don't we just start at the top? Lifting for police. I don't know.
Okay, cool. All right. So we talked about this recently, about how like what you were doing at the academy. So you just recently had like a PT outing, where a guy talked about vitamin D and zinc and made you do a bunch of burpees,
Right, right.
right?
Yeah.
So what would you say is like the average police officer, city of Boston, or just in a major sort of metropolitan city? What do you think their approach to physical fitness or PT is like? What are you guys encouraged to do?
Well, when you're in the academy, it's one thing. When you're out of the academy, it's something totally different, right?
Okay.
So I think that the interesting part is what's happening in the academy setting and why they're doing what they're doing, and then how that actually translates into what is effective and useful once you get out and you start policing, right?
Hmm.
When you're in an academy setting, there's no starting strength, right? You're not squatting or deadlifting and running some sort of a linear progression trying to get strong for the sake of being strong. You are at first, especially at first, it's all body weight stuff. You're running, you're doing push-ups, you're doing burpees, and a lot of that is because there needs to be some sort of a weeding out process in the academy setting. You start off with a certain number of people, and with if there's an expectation that a certain number of those people are going to drop out of the academy. And
Okay.
one way that you do that you test somebody's will or determination to be there is through these body weight movements, right? Like
Question.
what.
I'm not sure if it's like this everywhere, but let's say in the Boston Police Academy, it is like a thing where you are living in a secondary location and it is full indoctrination into everything that a police officer does. You sleep there, you eat there, everything, or do you show up there at 7 o'clock in the morning, you leave at 4 or 5 o'clock at night? How does it work?
It's the latter. So
Okay.
at our academy, it's a stay at home academy. So you're sleeping at home, you go home, you're doing all your homework at home, you shine your shoes, and you get your uniform ready, and then you got to be there at 6:30 in the morning and then you're at the academy until 5 o'clock, and then you go home.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So how much is that weeding out process? How many people out of 100? How many people are dropping?
Well, I mean, that's another controversial issue, right? Is because the numbers are so down, I would say, across the nation, that like there is pressure to weed people out. You want to have the right people in there, but you also need numbers, right? We need warm bodies in the seats to go to these calls, right?
You need an
So,
amount of people, yeah.
yeah, so it's like, if your attrition rate is like the Navy SEALs, like then no one's going to 911 calls, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to be working those guys to death that do make it through. So in my academy class, I think our dropout rate was something like 20%, if I had to guess, something like that. And
Okay.
most of those people left within the first few weeks. And
if
then
you can make it past the first few weeks, out of how long is the whole thing?
Gosh, my academy was like, what was it? 5 or 6 months, maybe, something like that.
5 or 6 months. Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
20%. That's a significant amount of people. I almost didn't expect it to be that many.
Yeah. Our academy now is like kind of cranking out classes back to back, which is good. Historically, we weren't doing that as much. We were doing like one class a year and a half. Now they're sort of cycling through more of them now, which is good. We're getting more people out there. But I would say about a 20% rate on average is probably pretty average for us. And like I said, that's in the first few weeks. That's usually like people who they just didn't get it, right. They just didn't get the memo. Like the best thing that you can do for that sort of thing is just show up in great shape, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I tried to do. Is like, in my mindset was, I'm going to show up in the best shape of my life, so that's one less thing to worry about, so that I knew I wouldn't have to worry about the PT stuff, because there's all these other things you have to worry about. In terms of the PT, or
like, did you show up with the correct expectations? Did you just nail the whole thing? Was it really hard?
It was really, really, really hard. Yeah.
Okay.
The academy, I thought the academy was very hard because I'm not a military guy, right? So like, I never had a military experience of going through, boot camp, and I played high school sports in college. In high school, a little bit in college, where people are yelling at you, but it's not nearly the same as like the military guys who had that boot camp experience, right? So that was the hard part for me, was like, oh, okay, it doesn't matter what I do here, like everything's wrong, right? Like that's the whole game, is like, it really doesn't matter what you do, you're gonna get screamed at. They just want to test to see like how you respond to that sort of stress inoculation, right?
Right.
So
do you think a lot of the people
that part was hard for me. That was the hardest part. The PT stuff was not that was fine, right? That wasn't that bad.
Okay, yeah, that was my next question. Do you think the people who dropped out, that 20%, was it primarily having a scary adult yell at them, or was it mostly, I feel like I'm going to die during PT?
I think it's got to be both, right?
A little bit both? Okay.
Yeah, because it just makes it so much worse. If like, if your worst fear is that like, I'm not going to be able to do the prescribed amount of push-ups, and then the cadre are going to come over and scream at me for that, and then your worst fear comes to fruition on day one, and you can't do them, and now you're the center of attention. It's just a terrible place to be, right?
Certainly.
So it's like, as soon as the staff realize that, like, okay, this guy's just pumping him out, like he's not going to be the issue, like they'll go find somebody else. There's going to be somebody else to pick on.
Right. That's really interesting, man. Okay, so what do you think was the most stressful part of the police academy? 6-month thing. Is there what I'm assuming there's a very lengthy final written exam and presumably some sort of practical, right?
Well, there's practicals, there's written exams all along the way. You have weekly exams, and then you have sort of like big exams, like a sort of like a midterm final thing. Practical. What was the hardest part? I think I would say, well, for me, the hardest part was a lot of the academy staff knew who I was before going.
Oh, really?
So yeah. So this begs a little bit of history. So in 2011, I was a clinician. I was a licensed mental health counselor, and I was working for an organization called the BEST Team, Boston Emergency Services Team. And that organization teamed up with the Boston Police Department to start what's called a co-responder program. These are fairly popular programs now. Back then, they weren't as popular. So basically, they would team up a clinician with a police officer, and then you go to the 911 call together. Okay. I was the first.
What year was this?
This was 2011.
2011. Okay, so well before the current, what if we didn't send police officers to places and we just sent social workers to places thing?
It was before all that.
Well,
Right.
before that, you guys were already doing it.
Right, but even then, we were late to the game. Like those
Really?
corresponder programs have existed on the West Coast for a long time,
Okay.
and Framingham was the first one to start theirs, and they start. I wouldn't know the date of theirs, but they started theirs. I would say like a decade before ours in Boston. In any case, irregardlessly, not a
Sure.
word, but irregardlessly, in 2011, I was asked to start that program through a strange course of events. And so I started that in 2011 with the police, and I did that for 5 years before I went into the academy to just become a cop.
Hmm.
So for that 5 years, I was all over the department, right? I was a corresponder in Roxbury and Mattapan. I would go to the academy and work out all the time. So I knew the academy staff
Oh,
because
wow. Okay.
I liked to work out.
Yeah.
So fast forward to when I actually went into the academy to become a police officer, it's all the same academy staff. So
Hmm.
the hard part for me is that I had to take that idea out of my head that like these guys were cool with me, because like
Hmm.
they weren't cool with me. Like
Right.
they do a really good job of like turning that switch to give me, and I'm thankful for it now, but they gave me a true academy experience, right? They could have just been like, oh, like whatever, we're gonna let Ben slide. Like he's a
Right.
cool dude. We know who he is. We know what he's
Hmm.
capable of. No, it wasn't that. They tested me to make sure that that was actually where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. I remember, one of the first few days, we started in the winter. We were out in the parking lot. There was sleet all over the ground. It was cold. It was miserable, and we were in a push-up position, a plank position, and everyone's freezing, and I'm shaking, and
Yeah.
my hands are shaking, and the whole thing. And I'm just looking straight down, and all of a sudden, one of the staff comes over to me, and he gets real close to my ear, so that nobody else could hear what he said. And what he said to me was, "Recruit Officer Linsky, um, you can expect to have you can expect to have a true academy experience here. We're not going to let you get away with anything.
Yeah.
We have the highest of expectations. Like that sort of thing.
That's
Basically, like
great.
scaring me into like, don't
Right.
think that this is going to be easy, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And at that time, I was wearing these really thin gloves, and they were soaked through, and I couldn't feel my fingers because of the sleet and whatever. So I would go up to one hand and squeeze my hand to get all the water out, and I
Hmm.
kept on going back and forth, right? This. And
Yeah.
so after he gave his little speech, and then he also said, and he said, "You got the wrong effing gloves too, didn't you?" And then he kind of
Yeah.
putting this thing in my ear like this is gonna suck, and it did suck. Yeah.
Hmm. So the stress inoculation to the academy, do you think it adequately prepared you for an on-the-job experience now that you've had 6 years post?
So I think there's different types of stress inoculation. So there's the stress of having somebody in your face and yelling at you, and you being able to sort of compose yourself. I think it prepared you well for that. Did our academy experience prepare you for the physical stress inoculation of like wrestling with somebody that doesn't want to be arrested, and
Right.
controlling someone and being able to articulate, where you are, getting on a radio, being able to sort of switch your aggression on and off, and
Hmm.
being able to do, sort of like small digit tasks, pulling your handcuffs out
Yeah.
while you're wrestling. So, it's like, I'd have to say that we're not the best at that. That's something that we can improve on. But I was lucky because I was still doing jujitsu during all that time, right?
Hmm.
So my jujitsu experience translate very well onto the street, and that's been a huge thing in terms of like the stress inoculation part of like being able to control somebody that doesn't want to be controlled,
Right.
um, wrestling someone to the ground that doesn't want to be wrestled to the ground, and then being able to turn that aggression off in an instant, knowing when the situation is under control, right? And that's something you can only get through like just lots of BJJ, lots of reps, like you
So
know.
how do you think police officers handle that who don't? And by the way, for the listeners' context, I started grappling in 2013. I'm a black belt in judo. I've competed at collegiate nationals, the senior national level, done pretty decent. BJJ, I do not have a belt because, frankly, I don't agree with it too much. I do love wrestling and I do love judo. Benny, on the other hand, you said is a BJJ blue belt, right?
Mhm.
And then what year did you start doing that?
I've been training for 6 years,
Six
something
years
like
now.
that. Yeah.
Okay, so basically
So
just almost similar timelines.
Yeah, similar timeline. Yeah, some
Okay.
time was taken off in there for like surgeries and stuff, but in total about 6 years. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we have some decent authority to speak on the subject. But like, how do you feel? Let's say you have an officer who hasn't participated in any of the grappling sports. They haven't done judo or wrestling or BJJ. How do they handle these things? Poorly.
I mean, that's the majority of police officers you're talking
Yeah.
about, right?
You
Like,
have to
so
be an anomaly almost.
yeah, I mean, there is a small minority of guys on the job on Boston who do have this sort of like grappling experience, who are very effective at their job, right? Um, and I would say that those are the types of guys who actually like, they probably rarely use these types of things because I would say that they have the confidence to be able to articulate themselves, right?
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, it's like a trump card, right? It's like magic, right? At the end of the day, it's really, it's like you're a
Yeah.
magician. I mean, you're a black belt in judo, so like
Yeah.
you're talking to somebody, and at the end of the day, if things go totally wrong, at the end of the day, I always have this trump card that I can put down and I can take control of the situation. So what
Hmm.
that does is it gives you the freedom to be able to explore and engage in a meaningful dialogue, and you're not going to freak out if the person is in your face, or if
Right.
if they're giving you some sort of resistance, you're going to roll with that resistance. You're going to have the time and the composure to be able to just let this moment play out, because at the end of the day, if nothing works, you're still going to win
Yeah. So it's
because
like
you have
almost the desire to escalate to like taser OC spray. It's almost gone, or it's still there certainly, but it's well reduced from someone who could be more nervous because they can't handle themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different ways to look at this, right? If you don't have grappling experience, and then you're reliant on your tools, your
Yeah.
tool belt, right? And that's it's better than nothing, right? It's like you surely don't want to take those tools away from people who
Yeah.
are not willing to put in the time for grappling sake. But I mean, just my personal opinion. I mean, this is just the opinion show, right?
Yeah.
If you I think it's better to have the confidence. I mean, this is a hands-on job. This is a
Hmm.
very physical job, right? And we're in the business of controlling people at the end of the day,
Yeah.
controlling people that don't want to be controlled. So you should be good at that, right? And tasers can fail. We have a new city ordinance in Boston that highly restricts our ability to use OC spray. You know, the city council passed something not too long ago, shortly after the riots, that highly restricts our ability to use OC spray. So,
Okay.
so OC is like tenable, right? If you pull out your baton and you start using a baton, we're allowed to use a baton, but but optically, how good does that look if I'm
Hmm.
taking my baton out and I'm whacking somebody in the joints? If I'm using it exactly how I've been trained to do, it looks terrible, right?
Yes, because you
And then
guys have like restricted areas. It's like this is the red zone, yellow zone is kind of like center, green
right,
is like limbs.
you're supposed to hit limbs, or
Yeah.
you're supposed to stay away from the joints.
How
It's like
effective do you think that is?
getting hit with a baton.
Let's say
Or
just I'm saying as compared to like if you had to say like when you say you are taking out people take out their batons, like is the expectation, oh, this will certainly solve the problem.
I actually, not a lot of people take out their batons anymore. To be honest, it just
I would bet.
it just doesn't happen because
Yeah.
it's so like if you're taking out your baton to whack somebody at this point, like a lot of things have gone wrong. You
Yeah.
know, we're getting pretty close to the end of our options.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Um, in Boston, we're pretty lucky that we have, especially in the busier parts of the city, if you call for help, a lot of people are going to show up, right? This
Right.
isn't the middle of like, I mean, I hate to throw a state out there. I don't want to throw anybody on the bus, but
Just
it's
use
not the,
Chase's Oklahoma. It's not
sure,
the yeah.
it's not the middle of Oklahoma where if you call the police, only Chase is showing up.
Yeah.
And if Chase can't handle it, then sorry, Chase.
That's it.
It's like if I get on the radio and I call for help, I'm going to get 10 cops that are going to show up that are going to help me out. Now, are these going to be 10 of the most capable police officers in the world? No, but it's going to
Hmm.
be 10 adult humans with their adult human body weight, and they're just
Yeah.
going to sit on this guy, which is
Yeah.
what we do, right? That's our
Right.
go-to move. We show up with a bunch of people, we put all that weight on that person, and then you
Hmm.
handcuff them, and it's over. You know, um, every once in a while it doesn't work, and it goes wrong, and a police officer gets overwhelmed, and they're not able to get on the radio, or not enough people are able to show up, or the problem is a domestic that's on the 10th floor. These things happen, and in that moment, it's like, I wish that we just got a little bit more serious about okay, what kind of policies can we put in place? How can we change our training? How can we
Hmm.
incentivize and get more police officers to feel like this is a useful part of their time, to
Right.
see all the benefits? Because I don't have to explain it to you. It's not just the job stuff. It's like a lifestyle thing. It's like
Hmm.
you're going to be a healthier person. You're going to be a happier person. You're going to be a better boyfriend, a better husband, a better father, a better son. You'll be better. Your mind will be clear. I just think it's largely the answer to a lot of problems.
Yeah. So okay. So this leads into one of the next questions I had. So we talked about like academy PT standards, big weed out process, ton of body weight stuff, get you really good cardio shape. What do they expect for you for PT once you are an officer, you're out of the academy?
Well, I mean, I can speak to what other departments are doing now, because I recently had this training that we talked about before,
Hmm.
through the Massachusetts Police Training Committee. Other departments, it's a department by department thing, right? So some other departments are I think they're doing the right thing, and they're incentivizing health and wellness, and they're getting really serious about that, right? They're Some departments are getting creative with it, and they're basically saying, hey, if you can pass this PT test, twice a year, then we're going to give you X number of days off,
Oh,
or
okay.
we're going to build in an hour of PT into your regular tour, and it'll be like an opt-in program. So as long as you can pass some sort of test once a year, then we're going to give you an hour to work out every day in your shift, that sort of thing. So that's how other departments are doing it, to try to incentivize that health and wellness.
Hmm.
um, I would say in Boston, like, we've got some catching up to do. There's we don't have a test right now. There's very little expectation about guys maintaining any sort of like PT standard. It's really a station by station culture about how individual supervisors will incentivize it within those districts, right? So we
Right.
have a bunch of different districts within Boston, right? And you know, it's great that we have supervisors that get it and they want guys to work out because they see the benefit of that. So they make
Hmm.
it work for those guys, right? They find a way to give guys time to work out. But we don't have any sort of written policy about that. Like,
Interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
it's too bad.
Okay, yeah, because I was thinking, like, I have a good amount of clients in the military. They'll have to have a tape test pretty frequently. They'll have a PT test generally twice a year. If you're switching units, you'll generally have one whenever you go to a new command. And it's like they're not the hardest PT tests in the world, but they certainly still ask for them.
Hmm.
Like it's almost the expectation you're aiming to 100 or at least 90% plus those tests, as opposed to just passing. And that's interesting to hear that for like police culture, or like, of course, depending on the department, but like for Boston, it's not like, all right, you get a tape test every 9 months to 12 months, and then PT test 2 times a year.
Yeah, I mean, it's too bad. Like I
Hmm.
said, I think that's a place for improvement within
Right.
Boston. But then again, it's like, I can think of one of the bosses that I had recently. Like, I'm in a specialized unit now, but when I was in a district before, we had a supervisor who totally got it. He loved to work out. Working out was
Hmm.
big for him. He knew that it was important to him. He wanted it to be important for everybody else. So he built it into the culture.
Yeah.
Like when COVID hit, and we had all these policies about, like, oh, we can't use the gym at the station anymore. Like, he was like, okay, let's drag everything outside. We're going to build a station. We're going to
Yeah.
build a gym in the parking lot. And
Yeah.
that's what we did. We
That's
dragged all the
awesome.
stuff outside, and we made time for it. He made it work for us. And I built a pull-up bar. Like, I went online on YouTube and I was like, how do I build a pull-up bar out of like just nothing,
Yeah.
and I built a pull-up bar. And to this day, it's like it's still in our
It's
wagon bay. So,
That's really cool.
you know,
Hmm. The
we just
wagon
gotta,
bay? Do you guys still call them wagons? The paddy wagon when you arrest
well,
people in
they're
bulk?
wagons. They call them wagons. Yeah.
Oh, that's sick.
Prisoner wagon.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Okay.
Prisoner wagon.
Not to dork out about that, but you said you're in a specialized unit now. I wanted to talk about that. That kind of ties into six current state of policing and some of the things we talked about before. So,
Yep.
what was your job before, and what is your job now?
So before, I was just a regular patrolman. I mean, I'm still a patrolman. That's my
Hmm.
rank. But I was in a district, so I was responding to 911 calls. I was in a busy district in Roxbury. I worked a first half shift, 4 to midnight, but we would do a lot of overtime during the day. So I was working all the time, responding to calls. I was just a regular patrolman. I would say a little over a year ago,
Hmm.
I switched over to a specialized unit called the Street Outreach Unit. So now within this unit, um, our unit does a lot of different things, so I wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah.
But in general, what this unit does is anything having to do with homelessness, mental illness, substance use that sort of touches the department kind of filters through our unit. So within that unit, each person does a lot of different things. Myself and my partner, we do a lot of like human trafficking type work.
Hmm.
So we work with the human trafficking unit. We work in an area of Boston called Methadone Mile, where there's a lot of people that are dealing with substance use issues. But we specifically target people that are trafficking females. We go after, we try to help women who are doing prostitution activities, and then we either arrest or summons the Johns that are coming in to sort of like prey on that vulnerable population. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
That's really interesting. And did you get
amongst a bunch of other things.
a
Yeah.
bunch of, and did you got chosen for that likely because of your background with social services?
I mean, I have a clinical background, so it made
Yeah.
sense. But I was also working in that area a lot because the
Okay.
area that I was working in before in Roxbury covers that area. So we were just showing face down there a lot and doing a lot of the work anyways as
The
patrolmen.
perfect person to do that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
myself and my partner came over from Roxbury, and we stepped into that unit sort of together. Um, No, I still do the negotiator stuff. I'm still like on. That's like another hat that I wear as
Hmm.
a crisis negotiator. So every once in a while, I'm on call for that. Where if there's some sort of a hostage situation or a barricaded person, and I'm on call, then there's an expectation I get called in, and I go and I do the sort of the negotiating, talking to somebody through a door or on a phone or something like that.
Right. So what are the priorities? Presumably there's like a very lengthy handbook of like, these are what your objectives are. These are what we think is okay in terms of communicating, concessions to be made. How exactly does that whole process work?
The negotiating part.
Yeah. Like, let's
So
say someone that there's a barricaded person, there's a hostage in there. They're like, Benny, put your cape on. How's it going? And then you show up to the scene. What happens?
So there's a lot of things that are happening at once, right? It's not just the crisis negotiators that get called in. Obviously, the SWAT
Hmm.
team and our whole special operations gets called in. And the name of the game is just slowing things down across the board. So that's the goal with everything, is that we're just trying to slow this whole process down. And one of the primary jobs of a negotiator is to do that, right?
Hmm.
Is to buy time to give your SWAT assets their time and space that they need to get themselves into a good position so that if they needed to respond immediately, go through a window, go through a door, um, they need time to set up and do that. And the negotiators are in a perfect position if they're communicating with the suspect to be able to lengthen that process out. So a lot of our training is about communicating with this person, sort of using our active listening skills,
Hmm.
but it's all about just giving the person time and space to be able to vent. And I'm just validating what they're saying. I'm doing a lot of things called emotional labeling. Oh, you sound really frustrated today, Alex.
Yeah.
Um, you know, basically, I'm just listening to what you're saying, taking that in, feeding it back to you, giving
Hmm.
you an opportunity to correct me if I'm wrong, or giving you an opportunity to say, yes, that's exactly how I'm feeling.
Hmm.
Um, and we're just time and space. We're just lengthening that whole process out until I can get you to a point where you've de-escalated enough to the point that you're now in your sort of rational mind, right? I'm trying to
Right.
get you out of your emotional brain. I'm trying to get you into your rational brain, you know, and
And then
that
some
takes
of these
time.
things take many hours,
Yeah,
many,
some of
many
them.
hours.
Yep. So I've been
Okay.
involved with calls that have gone through the night, all the way through the night. So we have an entire team of negotiators that comes out. It's not just one person.
Hmm.
So it's pretty cool. Everybody has a different role. Sometimes you're the primary. Sometimes you're the secondary person. Sometimes you're sort of this liaison that's going back and forth between the command staff. Everybody has a different role. But I really enjoy the process. Like that's a fun job to have.
Do you think you're uniquely good at it in any capacity?
I think that the when I went through the original training for it, the FBI does the training, by the way, which is pretty
Hmm.
cool. So the FBI has a
Can I
um,
classroom question real quick? Do they
go
wear the
for
blue blazers that say FBI in the back of them?
it. No,
Damn
no,
it.
no, they're pretty laid back.
Oh, that's so disappointing.
But the reason why they want the FBI doing it is because they want there to be they want everyone to be trained the same, right?
Hmm.
So like in Chase's Oklahoma department, if Chase is a negotiator, he needs to receive the same training that I do, so that if I'm in the next town over from Chase and he has a big event, some sort of a crisis event, and they call me in, we need to be on the same page from the beginning, right? So everybody's trained the same, which is I think is a pretty cool thing. I like being the primary is fun, right? I mean, it's like you're the one, you're in the
Right.
mix, you're talking to this person, but you're also just like so locked into that conversation
Mm-hmm.
that you can kind of miss other things that are happening around you. I kind of like the role of the secondary person who stands with the primary, listens to the conversation, and then literally on sticky notes, that's the system we use. We use sticky notes. We write suggestions down on sticky notes and I put them in front of the primary. Like,
Right.
you know, avoid this topic, talk about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
We call them hooks and triggers, right? A hook is something that I would talk about with you that's going to put you in a good mindset, right? That could be lifting weights or judo, right? That's probably going to make you happy. A trigger for you, I don't know, it could be anything, right? But triggers would be things that we write down and we say, that's a trigger, avoid that topic, right? So it's just, that's just a little bit of insight into the negotiator process, you know.
That's really interesting. Okay, so you did mention that primarily you're dealing with like people, the things that your unit deals with: substance abuse, mental illness, homelessness. How
Mhm.
large on the Venn diagram is the overlap between that and then these situations that you'll have to get into?
Between the negotiating stuff,
Yeah.
um, I don't, well, I would say that the overlap between homelessness, substance use, and mental illness is gigantic. It's all the same circle.
Yeah.
It's you know what I mean. It's like
Right.
it is one circle. I would say. Rarely do you find people who are homeless that don't have some sort of a substance use issue.
Hmm.
It happens. Usually, those people have some sort of chronic mental illness, though, right? The very, very, very small minority, extreme small minority of people that are just dealing with homelessness, um, so it might be some sort of like there's like a myth of like, oh, I lost my job, I couldn't afford my bills, I couldn't afford my mortgage, and all of a sudden I'm living on methadone mile. It's like, no, it's like those are not
Right.
the
It's not
stories.
a just down on your luck for the week.
It's
Yeah.
not right.
Right.
Those just simply aren't the story. It's like these are people who have sort of chronic addiction,
Yeah.
who have burned every bridge in their life
Hmm.
and find themselves at the bottom of a barrel at the very bottom or existing at the the lowest part of society, right? How much overlap is that with people that get into these negotiator situations? I would say not a lot, actually. I would
Really?
say the,
Okay.
the the people that end up in a situation where they bring in a negotiating team, negotiators, it's like a lot of that is like a crime of passion that got out of hand that the
Okay.
person never planned for, that they put themselves against the wall and all of a sudden they don't know how to get out of this thing, right?
Right.
Like that happens a lot.
Hmm.
Are drugs involved? Yeah, sure. Yeah, drugs can be involved, but these negotiator things, these could be your quote unquote normal people can find themselves in these situations.
That's really interesting. Okay, I would expect there's to be more of an overlap between mental illness or instability. I
Yeah,
think that's what people assume, that like I think people think that these things are always very far away. Like if they do see someone who's like homeless or dealing with an addiction problem, they're like, that is miles away from my life. It's like, it's probably not. If you really wanted to screw up your life, you could get it done in like 3 months. you know, it may take a minute, but you could really screw it up if you tried your best.
yeah,
And like with these situations you'll see on the news, you're like, oh, that guy has to be crazy. Like if there's a hostage situation in your town and you're like, okay, that guy was fucked up beyond belief.
yeah.
Um,
Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, like, yes, those situations exist for sure,
yeah.
and I think that there is some overlap there. I think the point that I'm trying to make is that like it's not always like that. You
Yeah.
know,
That's the cool
there's
part. That's really interesting to hear.
yeah.
Okay. And then I'm assuming which one I'm assuming there are ones that are relatively simple versus wildly complex. How large is that variation?
Um, I'd say I'd say it's kind of all over the place. You never quite know what you're going to get. So, for instance, like, so I have a go bag for when I'm on call for negotiating, and I have everything that I could possibly need to
Mhm.
survive for a 12-hour negotiation inside that bag. Right. I have all my paperwork. I have extra layers. I have some protein bars, some water, a power bank for my phone, pencils and pens and sticky notes and all that, all the things that I could possibly need, because you never quite know, right? Sometimes you
Hmm.
show up and it's over within an hour, and sometimes you show up and you're there for 12 hours, and you need to be prepared for that, you know?
Right. Okay. And then, this may be almost an impossible question to answer. What do you guys define as success in a negotiation situation? Do you guys define success as in just like no casualties, police or civilian? That's it. Do you guys define success as
Well, hmm, my supervisor defines success as, you know, not having to go tactical, basically,
okay?
right? If we're able to get to a point where we can negotiate this person to their rational brain, like I talked about before, and get them to make a good decision, that doesn't require a tactical response, then he considers that a response. So that's how he gauges it. I think that that's a good marker. You know,
Okay.
there's always ways that you can be better at this, right?
Hmm.
I was a primary negotiator a few months ago at a call where, a few police officers ended up getting shot, at our call. Um, Nobody was, or at least no police officers were killed. They were injured. They did get shot, and man, I had a lot of like remorse about that. I had a lot of like bad feelings afterwards because I was the primary on that call for at least the majority of it. At one point, they pulled me out and they brought somebody else in, which is very common. But I
Hmm.
was I was the primary for at least 3 hours or so. So I
Hmm.
had about 3 hours of body cam footage of me trying to talk with this person, and I went through all that footage afterwards to try to really pick it apart and see, where we could have done better. Um, yeah, so it's always it's a good learning experience.
What are the
Yeah.
typical means or modes, or I guess medians of interaction between you and, let's say, whoever the perpetrator or controlling factor is for these things? Is it like you're calling? No one has there many landlines. Like you're calling someone's cell phone. You're yelling through the window. What does this mean? How does this thing work?
It's either, I mean, I've been on ones where you're talking through a door, where
Okay.
you're talking on a cell phone. We do have like some tools. We have like some fun gadgets that we have like a phone that we can like give
Toss.
to them, like a
Yeah.
throw phone sort of thing. Um, yeah, it's usually either through a phone
Okay.
or through a megaphone,
Right.
or through a door, or it might be like down a hallway, that kind of thing. We've had that before. Person's at the end of a hallway, we're at the other end of the hallway, that
Hmm.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. And then this again, maybe another impossible question to answer. What would you say is the relative rate of hostage situations that don't require a tactical intervention?
Um,
50-50, 90-10, something like that?
oh God, uh, we went through like kind of a rough patch where I was involved in a bunch of them, and I was like, man, I was like, we are not doing well here. Like we are
Right,
going
swinging and
tactical, like
missing.
yeah, we're going tactical every time. Um, but then it's like, I think back to a whole bunch where everything went fine, where it was a conversation and we just needed to take our time. So
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe 50-50.
Okay,
It's there's a lot of pressure to not go tactical, right?
certainly.
Nobody wants to
It's
do
the
that,
last thing, yeah.
it really is, so we're trying to give as much time as possible to not do that. So if it gets to the point where there is some sort of a tactical option, it's because we've really run out of other options, right? The
Right.
situation has become unsafe,
It's about
untenable.
to reach critical mass, and then do you guys have, like, defining do you have a list of prerequisites before a tactical intervention takes place? So, like, you have a nationalized training system where the FBI says, "Here are the things where if these are happening, we strongly recommend tactical intervention, otherwise keep doing you."
There probably is. I'm
Okay,
not privy. I'm not privy to it
okay.
because it's like we have the negotiators, and then you have the SWAT guys, right? And both of these things are operating at the same time, and they're
Mhm.
going through their checklist of like everything that's happening, and then we're going through our checklist at the same time, and we have people in the middle that are sort of communicating back and forth about the progress and not the progress, and then you have somebody, some sort of command staff looking over the whole thing, that at the end of the day gets to decide when this thing needs to go tactical, right? And I'm sure that they have a whole bunch of things to look at, but every situation is going to be different.
Right.
How many people are involved? Is the public, in close proximity?
Mhm.
Does the person are they armed? It's
Right.
you know
That would be a very interesting technical handbook to read. I'm sure it's not thin by any measure measure of the imagination.
There's a guy who got kind of famous off this, Chris Voigt. He was an FBI negotiator.
Sweet.
He wrote a few books. I read one of them that I actually took a few things from, that I've used a few times. He has this statement about fairness that I usually try to plug in to whatever negotiation I'm doing at some point, because I
Mhm.
really like it. It goes something like, Alex, my intent with you is to be fair throughout this conversation. And if at any point you feel like I'm being unfair, I want you to let me know so I can fix it.
Right.
At some point, I try to get that line in there because I really like it. I feel like it sets the tone for you and I, as like, we're almost going to be colleagues through this thing, to
Mhm.
try to work through this thing. And I want to give you the power to tell me when you think I'm being unfair so that I can resolve that, you know?
Right. Yeah, because there's an obvious power dynamic that's happening. It's like they're leveraging the hostage, of course. You're leveraging all of the violence that is contained outside.
Yes.
It's not being acted upon them. So it's like I'm sure for
Yeah.
their stress level is infinitely high. That must be very interesting to try to talk someone down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially at the beginning.
Okay.
So you're not doing a ton of talking at the beginning, or at least you shouldn't be. If you're
Yeah.
talking more than the other person, then something's amiss.
Right. Have you ever met someone in this whole process who was notably unique or better at the negotiation process than other people? And I'm not talking about your colleagues. I'm saying I'm attempting to negotiate with this I don't know, whatever the term you guys use, perpetrator, hostage taker, whatever it is. You're attempting to negotiate with that person and you're like, this person is quite the puzzler. This person is acting or behaving wildly different than our expectations.
You talking about the suspect,
The
the su-
suspect. There we go. That's
suspect,
the term I'm looking for.
suspect behaving differently.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we've had yeah. There's one that comes to mind. Yeah, where people were, where I felt like we had gotten past the emotional brain and we were well within to the rational brain,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden this person went to a much different place, and it, usually when that sort of thing happens, it's one of two things. It's usually that they are, on some sort of a substance, like
Right.
maybe like methamphetamine or something like that, or they're in the midst of like a manic episode and they're just like rapid cycling through that mania hypomania state. um, but yeah, that can be difficult to deal with, because then it's like you're trying to like you're trying to ride a wave, you're trying to catch this wave at
Right.
the perfect spot to be able to get them to make a good decision, and then if you miss it, now we're back down again, right?
Mhm. And then you
So
start the whole thing.
yeah, we've definitely had those before, sure.
Last question, all of this, on the negotiation stuff. Bear with me for one more.
Yeah.
How do you feel like this whole process is portrayed in the media, through the news, and then as well in like popular culture? So like in a movie or a television show. Um, you can tackle whichever one of those you want to go with first.
I mean, uh, well, I mean, for the negotiating, well, I think it's more interesting just to talk about policing in general. So I think policing in general, we're we're not represented very fairly. I don't say that
Uh,
without sounding ridiculous. It's just, well, let me talk about my own personal experience, right?
yeah.
Um, I got it all wrong. Okay. So like before I got that job, when I was doing the corresponding, riding along with the police as a clinician, right? I had a very limited understanding of what policing was. I grew up in a relatively small town. I had very little exposure to police. Um, and my idea of policing was based on whatever it was based on, what I've seen in movies or TV shows or whatever. And then when I had the opportunity to start doing these ride-alongs, um, it really like changed my whole mindset. Like I
Hmm.
started seeing things in a very different way, and a lot of things changed for me. How I viewed the police changed. My politics changed. How I generally move through life changed.
Right.
Some of my core values changed and my ethics changed, because I saw a part of humanity that I didn't really know existed, and
Hmm.
I saw the way that police interacted with that, and everything sort of changed for me. And so I think, even so, my own personal experience, I mean, it's like the proof is in the pudding. Like, do police get are they accurately portrayed? Like, of course we're not. And it's like, and it's, and I had the personal experience to go through
Yeah.
it because I had my idea of what it was, and I was wrong. I was way wrong.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It certainly does. Yeah, I mean, I'll if you're unwilling to say it, I will say that you guys are portrayed incredibly unfairly, and I think it comes down to most people having never been in a truly stressful situation in their life, or
Mm,
what we can say would be like objectively stressful. So they've never had someone trying to kick their head off. They've never had someone trying to kick down their door. They've never had try anyone, and it's great. It is wonderful that most people have never had something bad happen to them.
yeah,
But imagine if you had a job that interacted almost solely with that part of the world. It
right.
is almost an impossibly difficult task to manage. And it's just like, I think a lot of people describe these things as like systemic problems, despite not granting any sort of, they don't grant any leeway for the individual situation, right? So they'll say like, we have all of this evidence for this like systemic problem that we have, but we are unwilling to get to a granular level where it is three or four people in a room in an incredibly stressful situation, and it seems impossible to deal with.
My favorite examples of that are that every once in a while you'll see like a news agency that will do some sort of a piece where they're like, okay, let's take the reporter and bring him down to the academy and put the reporter through the paces, right?
Yeah.
Like the reporter's going to be the cop, and they're going to have, the fake gun, and they're going to go up to the fake suspect, and they're going to have to decide like, how do I arrest a person that doesn't want to be arrested, or do I need to pull my gun out right now? Or it's like, oh, this person is coming at me with a baseball bat. Do I shoot them? Like, like
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And it's like, those are my favorite,
Yeah.
real life metaphors, because it's like, it's policing come to life. And then you talk to the reporter afterwards and you say like, well, how did that go for you? What did you think? What are your expectations? What do you think it's like, and usually
Right.
the reporters are like, yeah, that was crazy. I
Hmm.
don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's almost like people assume that they'll be good at everything. It's kind of like armchair quarterbacking, and I'll see this a lot if I ever watch mixed martial arts or wrestling or anything like that with people who don't do martial arts. They will be more than readily willing to criticize the athletes who are literally fighting for their life at the activity, right?
yeah,
Like, oh, I would have never got caught in that triangle. I can't believe he didn't stuff the double. Like, what the hell is that guy doing? Having never participated, people just think they'll be good at things automatically,
yeah.
which is helpful. I guess that's like it's a good confidence thing to set you on through your life. But I don't think people realize just how immensely difficult it is to control a person who doesn't want to be controlled, who isn't following any sort of rule set. It's like they're not a high school wrestler with you. And then also at the same time being like, I now have to manage a weapon. I have to manage my taser. I have to manage my OC spray. I have to manage my firearm. I have to manage the safety of everyone around me while also following a rule book. Like it has to be complex and super stressful. I don't think people really give it the gravity that it needs.
I would say that that kind of bravado is also super dangerous. Like
Yeah.
from if a police officer is the one that has it, right? If the officer says to himself like, oh, they see some video and they're like, oh, there's no way the guy would never get that off on me, or like I wouldn't let him do that, or why
Hmm.
didn't he just punch him in the head, or
Yeah.
like,
Why
it's
didn't
like,
they shoot them in the leg? Shoot the knife or gun out of their hand?
yeah,
That's
well, yeah. I mean, those are ridiculous statements. But
uh,
like the part that worries me is when police officers see videos of other cops that are not able to maintain control over a suspect.
hmm.
They'll make some sort of an excuse and say why it happened to that guy and why it wouldn't happen to them.
Hmm.
And that's where it gets dangerous. And I think that this is where we can do better, right? This is where we can do better at the academy level, especially. And we can put people into situations where they can experience that sort of stress inoculation of losing control, of losing power, of being overpowered in a safe environment, right? There are ways that, you have a martial arts background, I have a martial arts background. There's ways that you can do this in a
Hmm.
relatively safe environment to put somebody through the paces of that sort of stress inoculation. And then to say, okay, we're going to build you back up. We're going to teach you some skills to be able to deal with that situation that just happened. And
Yeah.
then we rep this thing out, baby. Like over the next 6 months, we're going to rep this thing out to the point till you get to the point where you're able to take a person to the ground that doesn't want to be taken to the ground, that you're able to control this person on the ground that doesn't want to be controlled, that you're able to still see your environment around you, get on the radio, safely handcuff them, like just be able to rep these things out so that, because if if you don't have that, imagine the scenario that you don't have that, that you don't put somebody through the inoculation of being in a physical fight and being able to handle themselves in that physical fight, then this is a physical job. Like they're going to get into a fight, right? You go to enough 911 calls, you're going to get into a fight. You're going to get into a role. And if your first role is on the job where you have the whole belt here, where, by the way, like this thing is a deadly weapon to you and to me, right? And I've got it on me. So we're already in a deadly force situation if a person's trying to fight, right? Potentially. Because if he overpowers me and he gets a hold of my gun, then who knows what he's going to do, right? So if the first time that you get into that and you're trying to deal with it, I would say you're going to be much more likely to go to a deadly force place because you're not going to have the confidence to know that, like, I've been here before. I've been here before. I know what to do if a person throws a haymaker at me, right? I know how to close the distance. I can get to the person's back. I know how to bring them to the ground. I know how to get on top. I know what a Kimura looks like. I can base out, right? If you haven't gone through that, 1,000 times, and the first time you do it is on the street, like, you're in trouble, and you've seen a million videos of that, right? And it's like, it doesn't look good,
Yeah, it's like you would
That's my
think you have
soapbox.
this, man. Like I agree. I know you got. I know we agree already, but still, it's like you have that 6-month period. You would think, and then with the university judo club that I was at, we had the university police, the University of Pittsburgh, and then CMU police would also use our mat room. And then some of the martial arts and grappling instructors who were in our mat room also worked with some of the police. So then they would use some of us. They would grab someone from the MMA club, the judo club, wrestling club, whatever, and they would have them work as like hey, be someone who is resisting arrest to this cadet who is here for 3 months and they can do like 10 push-ups, and it's, I think there are even some videos of it if you just look up like, I want to say the last one I saw was like attempting to arrest a BJJ black belt and having it just be hilariously difficult,
Yeah.
You would think with that 6-month period, you would say like, okay, we're going to make this person across 6 months. We have them every day. We're going to dedicate an hour a day, just an hour a day after PT, whatever the hell it is, to making them competent at doing the things that they'll need to do.
It's a huge opportunity lost, I think, because it's like once you get out of the academy, like when you're in the academy, that's your whole job. You're working 40 hours a week, and your job is to become the best version of a police officer you can, right? You're trying to learn as much as you can. You're trying to get in great shape. You're trying to, your physical attributes, yada, yada. After you get out of that, now you're just working, right? So it's like you're working your job. You're going to details. You're going to court. You're going to overtime. You got your kids, your girlfriend. You're cooking your meals. You got your dog. It's like you have all these other things now, and the pressures of being an actual officer. Where like you got that 6-month period near the academy. That's just a huge opportunity to do what you said, right? You could, and it's like, I train jujitsu now, for me, it's like, we can get into programming issues, which is like a whole other thing, but it's like, I try to lift 3 days a week and go to jujitsu twice a week. That's my goal. That's my optimal goal. Does it happen every week? Of course not. Like, it's like, but that's the goal, right? It's like, I want to lift 3 days and I go to jujitsu twice. That's so for me, it's like twice a week. Now, if you were rolling a half an hour or an hour 5 days a week or even 4 days a week in the academy, imagine how much more mat time you're getting too. Like
you
that's
pick it
just
up real fast.
6 months of mat time is like, for me to get that much mat time with my 2-day a week schedule, which, let's be honest, sometimes that's 1 day a week, like that's going to take me 4 times as long. You know what I mean? So it's like you could in a 6-month period, you could get these guys to like almost a blue belt, maybe, sure. Like surely you'd be able to teach them, like they'd get good at like 1 or 2 takedowns and like understanding positions and get some good escapes and like at least give them the bug, and then if you develop some sort of an incentive program afterwards and they keep up with it,
Yeah, because
They're
it's
just
like
going to be that much better.
you said it earlier, for those of us who just joined, but you said you were working from 4 to midnight on a common shift, and then you would oftentimes have stuff to do before your shift started. So either like overtime beforehand. It's like imagine that sort of work schedule. Most of us work 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or something to that effect. But it's like imagine working 4 to midnight, you have a physically active job, and then also you have to keep up with practice requirements to be able to do your job effectively outside of it. Like it's it's a lot, so like the academy opportunity to be like, hey, it's like we're gonna have a wrestling coach at the academy, sorry everybody, like you're gonna
Yeah,
figure it out.
yeah.
It makes sense. I don't know why it's not a thing.
I totally, I wish, because you're right. It's
Yeah.
like once you get out and you're on the street and you're working, like, when I was at a district, yes, my regular shift was 4 to midnight, right? But I wasn't working 40 hours a week. I was probably working like more like 70, 75 hours a week,
Jesus.
right? Because it's like you're doing details or overtime
Hmm.
because we were so short on bodies that you would often get ordered to work an overtime shift that you might not want to work. And
Yeah.
so because of you're only allowed to work a certain amount of period within a 24-hour period. In Boston, it's 18 hours. You can't work more than 18 in a 24-hour period. So guys, you'd have to pick your poison. Like I'm a 4 to midnight guy. So my poison is, do I want to jump on the grenade and work during the day? Or do I want to roll the dice and hope I don't get ordered for a last half shift
Hmm.
and have to stay from midnight to 8 in the morning? And it's like, and that was the worst thing because then you're on a roller coaster because you can't get out of it because now you've maxed out you're close to 18 hours. I can't get up in the morning to work something to get off the roller coaster. Now you have to do it again on night 2, night
Right.
3, night 4. You can't get off of it. So now
Right.
all of a sudden you've changed your sleep schedule in the middle of a week, right?
Hmm.
It was a nightmare.
And then
So
people have problems meal prepping with a standard office job. They're like,
yeah,
how am I gonna have time to fit in my workout and my meal prepping with my 8 hour a day job?
it's like for me it's resource management, right? So like
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I struggle with, that I have to constantly monitor, is how do I manage my resources throughout the week,
Hmm.
because my week can be somewhat unpredictable. As much as I want to predict it, it can be somewhat unpredictable. So like my resources are going to like I said, I want to lift 3 days a week and I want to do jujitsu 2 days a week. Now that I'm in this specialized unit and I have a little bit more freedom and I can't be like ordered for these overtime shifts, I'm very lucky. Like I admit that I'm
Hmm.
very lucky that I can manage these things easier now. When you're in a district before, it's really hard to do that. It
What's
was
the
very,
ratio or percentage of people who are in a position like yours versus like standard patrolman, like you mentioned before?
we have way more patrolmen than we have specialized
Is it
units.
is that like
Yeah.
99-1 or is it like 75-25?
Oh God, I don't even know. It's probably like 90-10, 80-20,
Damn.
maybe something
Okay,
like
yeah.
that.
So there's
I mean,
not many people who are in your positions.
there's not a lot of, no,
Yeah.
but it has to be that way. Because, I mean, you need patrolmen, you need guys responding to 911 calls. That is the heart of any department. That's the
Hmm.
backbone of your department, is people responding to 911 calls. These specialized units serve a really good purpose, and you need them because there are things that are happening in communities that
Right.
the patrolman just doesn't have enough time to address. Right, like
Yeah.
you need a fugitive unit, you need a drug unit, you need a gang unit. Um, you need a domestic violence unit. Those are all specialized units, right?
Hmm.
Because it's just the nature of the work. But imagine trying to juggle that sort of scheduling on that sort of a schedule. It was insane. It was really hard
Hmm.
to do.
Yeah, I think if I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but the first call that we had, it was rather early in the morning. You needed an early AM call, and you were in a patrol car.
Yeah,
You just
probably.
had your vest on, had a beanie on. You were just like, "Hi, how's it going?" I was like, "Oh, well, I know what you do for work now. Cool, okay."
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah,
you, you just you got to fit stuff in when you can,
no mystery
which
there.
which like I said before, which is so great when you have a supervisor that really gets it,
Hmm.
and is like, okay, you're trying to get a lift in, like, cool, like we'll cover for you. We'll make sure that somebody's going to these calls, and it's like that's when it's nice to have people that really understand how important like the health and wellness piece is.
Hmm. It's incredibly important because it's like with such like mental health problems or like the amount of stress on someone's mental health in a position like that, even if you have an easy job, but just working that many hours a week is still stressful. Then having a stressful job and working that many hours a week, people need their alone time for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really want to really want to get in the weeds, do some research into like the life expectancy of a police officer. It's not good.
Low.
Yeah, I mean, the life expectancy of like a normal person,
Hmm.
is like 75 or something, and police,
Hmm.
like, we're not there.
Yeah. That's sad. That's
Yeah,
sad.
it's
Sorry to
just the
hear, man.
stress. Yeah,
Yeah, because it's like stress, and they'll say the same thing about night shift workers too.
yeah,
Um, yeah, Graham's in there. Yeah, we are taking questions. We have a few people in the chat. Hello, everybody in the chat. Um, but yeah, okay. So police stuff. It's a cool job. It's very hard. I guess let's just talk BJJ, man. So you've been doing BJJ for 6 years. Did you
yep,
do any sort of grappling or martial arts before BJJ?
no, and I wish I did. I wish I
Yeah.
wrestled in high school.
Yeah. That's everybody.
Because
Yeah.
I'm, like, I'm a 40-year-old guy, and I was
Hmm.
like, and I get on the mats, and I, like, I feel whatever, pretty confident, and then it'll be like a 19-year-old wrestler,
Hmm.
white belt, comes in and just like shoots a double, and I'm like, as I'm falling to the ground, I'm realizing like I should have wrestled in high school.
No. I'm gonna make my kid. Normally, it's I'm gonna make my kids wrestle in high school. Is what it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Now
I'm,
I have sympathy for the wrestling dads that I met in high school. Because it's like, yeah, they probably just got their ass kicked when they were in there at some point, and they're like, I'm gonna make sure my kids this doesn't happen to them.
yeah.
Oh man, that's funny. But yeah, so you've been doing BJJ for 6 years. What type of school are you at? Are you at like a primary league IBJJF school? Are you more of like a self defense school?
I'd say it's um, I mean, a lot of people at our school compete.
Hmm.
They go to tournaments. So we do gi. It's like a mix of gi and no gi. I would say it's like 50-50.
Hmm.
Gi no gi. There's like some kickboxing, Muay Thai classes on top of it, and then we have like competition classes too. So it's like a pretty good mix of like whatever you're looking for. Um, yeah, I like it.
Okay,
I've
and
been
then
I've been I've been with the same guy for a while, since the beginning.
and how have you dabbled in either kickboxing or Thai?
Yeah, I used to take like some classes here and there,
Yeah,
the kickboxing stuff, and it's okay. Like, I'm
yeah.
into it. I feel like, again, for me, it's excuse me, it's just resources.
Hmm.
So it's like, at this point, it's like, if I wanted to get into Muay Thai or kickboxing, it's like that's a lot of impact, and I'm gonna have to take a look at how much resources. It's like, how much cash do I have to spend at the beginning of the week, and every day I'm spending a little bit. It's
Hmm.
like deadlifts, that costs you $50. Squats, that's $100. It's like, I only get paid so much. It's
Yeah.
like, now you want me to go fight this teenager? It's like,
Hmm. Yeah. Man, that's how I like to describe it to a lot of people. It's like budgeting physical resources. One thing that I will run into in intermediate programming, I think we had this conversation at some point, Benny, where people will be like, weight has been increasing steadily through the novice phase, and it's like, hey, we're doing intermediate work now. The goal isn't to have it be as heavy as possible every single time, and people will be like, why? What the hell? I could probably put 5 more pounds on, and it's like, slow down, slow your roll, like,
mm,
it is costly. Everything has a fatigue cost. Those are the two I would say. If you like search, if you had text logs for everything I've ever said to all of my lifters, fatigue cost and bar speed, I think, would be the two most common things that I say to people. Because it's just like, in a situation like Betty's in, like, you're a multi-sport athlete. So it's like, some people go so far as to say, like, police officers, people in the military, they'll call them tactical athletes. They'll say like, hey, you have tactical demands for your job. You are considered a tactical athlete. That's how you should treat yourself. But it's like, you're doing that, tactical athlete, also grappling, and you have an interest in being strong. Like, it is a lot of things to manage, especially for the budget. Um, but BJJ talk. Do you guys like a pressure passing school? Are you guys like a crazy guard school? How would you define it?
um, I, I Jesus, I don't know. I mean, I think probably a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Um, we've got we have guys who like to compete a lot in no-gi, and so they're into a lot of the leg stuff.
Mhm.
Um, getting into these like weird positions, that I just try to avoid at all costs. Then we got like some bigger guys who, we got one guy who's a correctional officer who's like huge, and all he does is like pressure passing type stuff. So I feel like we've got a little bit of everything.
And what
Um,
about you yourself?
I am trying to, like, I feel like, so, I'm in my third year as a blue belt now,
Mhm.
something like that. I haven't competed in a long time. I go as much as I can, which is like, once or twice a week, something like that. And so for me, it's like, I feel like I'm now at a point where I'm competing like pretty well with the purple belts. You know, I feel like I'm sort of like on the cusp there. And so what I'm trying to do is really like sort of develop a mixed game where like I'm pressuring and then I'm being a little bit more dynamic. You know, like that's the feedback that I've been getting lately from people, is that like they feel like my game is somewhat unpredictable, and
Hmm.
that's the sweet spot where I want to be. Is that I want to be pressuring and then all of a sudden be somewhat dynamic and be passing back to pressuring. You know, I'm trying to broaden my game a little bit more now,
Hmm.
and really just work on like my weaknesses. You know, for a
What do
long
you think
time
your
it was
weaknesses
just,
are there?
I think my weaknesses is, for a long time I was perfectly happy playing from my back, you know,
Yeah.
just I was like,
Okay.
whatever, like that's
Yeah.
fine, like playing from my back. And I prided myself, that's not a word, I in just playing defense, being very defensive, looking for my opportunities when they would come,
Hmm.
sweeping if the sweep was there, and if not, just putting somebody back in my guard and playing defense. And it got to a point where I was like, okay, this is now sort of becoming a weakness,
Hmm.
because that's not a place that I want to automatically be. You know,
Right.
for a while that was just sort of like self-preservation, because my programming and my scheduling was so crappy that
Hmm.
like really all I had the energy to do was to go and play half guard
Survive on
bottom
bottom. Yeah.
and just throw a shield up and throw up
Hmm.
some
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 frames. Yeah.
frames and just sort of relax into it. And now that my program has gotten better and and I feel like more times than not I go to jiu-jitsu now and I'm like, oh, I actually feel good, instead of like shit, I usually just feel terrible, you know. Now I actually feel decent, and it's like, well, I can spend this currency, spend these
Yeah.
resources, and play from the top. So now what I'm trying to make a note with is that every time I go, I'm like, just be on top,
Hmm.
just be on top as much as possible. Don't be satisfied with playing from the bottom.
Right.
Be on top. If you find yourself on the bottom, sweep, or even if you have to do a tactical stand up and almost kind of reset this thing, just
Hmm.
do it and play from the top, you know. And I found that that's forced me to really like expand my game in a way that's like just way more fun, you know. Now I can be more mobile, I can be more
Hmm.
dynamic, you know.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
mobile dynamic passing, I thoroughly enjoy. That is just
Mm.
fun. If you're athletic and you're jumpy, you can do a lot of stupid shit with pressure
Yeah.
passing, or with not with mobile passing. Pressure passing, I can't stand it. I can't stand pressure passing in a gi. I think the first
Yeah.
few times I've tried it with like people who are good at BJJ, there was a lot of weird grabbing the bottom end of my skirt on the
Yeah.
gi and
Yeah.
wrapping it around. And I was like, come on, man, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
leave.
Yeah. Well,
I'm just gonna
also
walk away.
what I noticed, I mean, obviously, like as my body changed with
Hmm.
starting strength, it gave me new opportunities to like use this body in a different way. I went from 160 pounds when I started this thing to about 193 right now,
Hmm.
194, right? And if I can take that 193 pounds and isolate that right into the person's solar plexus, like
Hmm.
my pressure passing is just way better than it used to be, you know. It's
Hmm.
like, and it's just physics, it's just numbers, you know. So like that's fun, you know. But and I think you made the metaphor about like you got to learn how to drive this new car, like you're a new
Hmm.
car, you got to learn how to drive it, right?
Yeah.
So now that I've sort of really sort of like melted into this new body, like I've kind of figured out how it works a little bit more. Now I can be a little bit more dynamic, and I'm not going to just like spring a gasket. I don't know if you remember this, but like I got into
uh,
a foot chase like sort of soon after, like I
was
put
this the
on
one
all.
where you skinned the back of your hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah.
I ripped open the whole back of my hand. The guy went to jump over a fence, and I wrapped him up against the fence, and then took him over my back. And I just didn't let go of my hands. I took him all the way to the ground because I had his hands in, and I didn't know if he had something on his waistband. So
Hmm.
I just kept the grip, and we went down, and the weight landed. Anyways, before that happened, I blew out my hamstring on the chase, on the foot chase. And
Hmm.
that would have been the first time I had really sprinted, like since I had like put on all this like, this mass, you know?
Yeah.
So I was like, I had 160 pounds in my mind, but my body was 190. And I tried
Hmm.
to drive the 190 like a 160 body. And my
Hmm.
right hamstring just immediately blew as I was like
Hmm.
running across Mass Ave. And I remember saying to myself, I'm like, well, it's already gone. So like,
We're doing it.
we're just going, and I
Yeah.
just kind of hobbled the rest of the chase.
Yeah.
And I remember telling you that, and you were like, well, maybe we should work in some
Some
sprint work or
add some
something.
conditioning work in. Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm Oh man, that's really yeah. So it's for people who haven't had major weight fluctuations in their life, it is very real and very notable. It
Mm,
certainly is. Like even if I'll have grappling athletes who are doing like a water cut, like if you normally walk around like 6-7 kilos heavier than you fight at, and you cut all that off for your tournament, you'll feel really different. You know, and then if you like use these benchmark activities, if you haven't jumped in a while, like you haven't sprinted like in a while, and like in Benny's situation, and then you gain 10 kilos and you try and do that, you'll be like, this feels really different.
yeah.
you know, and the same thing, like a lot of takedowns in wrestling or judo, you don't realize how weight dependent they are and strength dependent they are. So it's like, if you don't do it for a few months, you get really strong, you come back and you're like, wow, I'm just picking people up. This feels way easier.
Yeah.
Like your blast doubles, your suplexes, all that stuff just feels it's very helpful to be strong. It certainly is.
Hmm.
What are your hopes with grappling, do you think? So it's like you're working on this more of a top game now. Are you hoping to be, do you think you're competent at stand up? Are you trying to get really competent at stand up? Things like that.
Um, I mean, I could definitely be better.
hmm
Yeah, I could definitely. I think at the beginning of the year, our coach asked us to write down like what are our goals for the year.
hmm
What do you want to do? What do you. And one of mine was I wanted to compete again, right? I wanted to get back into competition because I think that there's just a whole bunch of like ancillary benefits to doing that.
Certainly.
Um, and the other one was in terms of takedowns. I wanted to concentrate on takedowns from the rear, because in
Okay.
policing, I feel like that is, if you can get good at taking somebody down from behind them, like that's a huge advantage
hmm
because we're generally trying to get behind the person, or we find ourselves in these situations a lot.
Right.
As you're handcuffing a person and then they go to run, and you're sort of reaching out to grab them, you're
hmm
going to find yourself in that position of behind them, or you're in a foot chase and you catch up to them and you are behind them,
Right.
or they are on the ground and
On
you're
a
on top
car, on the wall, something like
on
that.
a car, on a wall, they're on the ground and they start to build a house and get up, you're already behind them. So
hmm
like, being well versed at those takedowns from behind and from the rear, I think is huge. So that's what I've been working on when it comes to like my takedown game. Is I'm almost exclusively working on, getting behind the person and then doing some sort of takedown from behind.
Yeah, because it's like a suspect's not gonna like try to clinch up with you. That's not the that's not
They're not
their
going to hold. Yeah, they're
it's
not going to
not their
hold. We're
goal.
not going to we're not going to be doing a dance, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. They're going to be
hmm
trying to get in the way, and I'm going to
Yeah.
be trying to get them. And so if that happens, that's where that moment of connection happens.
hmm
Usually, right?
And then in terms of things like weapon retention, so it's like I'm assuming that is touched on in the academy, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We go through that.
How
Yep.
adequately do you think that's touched on?
I mean, it's like, um, I mean, I think it's good. I think that, do we do it enough? Well, it's not often that somebody grabs your weapon too. Like that is a very rare instance, right? It's one of those super rare things that if it does happen, you should have some sort of a plan. And
hmm
also, if it does happen, a lot of other things have gone wrong before that.
Right.
Nobody comes up to you, or knock on wood. I mean, I hope it would never happen,
hmm
but nobody comes up to you and just tries to disarm you.
hmm
It just doesn't happen. It's like the moment somebody disarms you because they have knocked you out, you've been punched, you've been sucker punched, you're on the ground, and
hmm
now they're trying to disarm you. Or you're wrestling with the person and they reach down and they try to grab your gun or your OC spray or something, or they're trying to pull on it, right? It's like a number of other things have already gone wrong before you've gotten to that point. And I'm not saying that weapon retention training is bad. Like, I think that we should be doing it, but having that conversation absent some sort of grappling
Yeah.
curriculum is absurd,
hmm
because like the person's never going to, he's never going to get to my gun if I,
Doing your job correctly.
if I, if right,
Yeah.
if I do even a, am I allowed to swear on this
Yeah. I
podcast?
mean,
I
you do
don't know.
whatever you want, man.
Even if I do a really shitty job of like, or distance management or whatever, even if I do like a really crappy jab, like my worst day at jujitsu, my worst day, that person's not going to get anywhere near my gun.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not,
Right.
because I'm just going to grab underhooks and I'm just going to keep their arms way away from my gun. It's just not
Mm-hmm.
going to happen,
Yeah. And
And
you're
that's
not
just,
arresting purple or brown belts out on the street normally. That's
I'm not. I'm not. They're not gonna pull a whizzer and do some sort of crazy thing. They're not gonna do it. I'm gonna
uh,
grab, I'm gonna
yeah.
grab an underhook and maybe turn them over and a Kimura, and it's done. It's
Mm-hmm.
done very quickly.
Right.
Um, yeah. The times that I've used jujitsu at my job, luckily, have been few and far between. But when
Mm-hmm.
it does happen, it is immensely effective. And
Yeah.
that's not. I'm not just blowing smoke. It works.
Mm-hmm.
It totally works. Jujitsu stuff, or I'm sure judo too, against an untrained person is like magic.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I
It's
would recommend judo for policing because they're not so like in wrestling there's the concept safe return to mat. If you pick someone up and you slam them in like high school boys wrestling, they're gonna get you off the mat for failure. It's not a safe return to the mat. If you go
mm,
to a BJJ competition and you slam someone or throw someone hard enough, it's not safe return to the mat. Get out. You're leaving. In judo, the point of it is to make sure the return to the mat is not safe. You're throwing the person on their head or their upper back. I don't think that would be kosher for policing. Um,
yeah, and if you think about the takedowns that are actually taught at the academy level, I think really the only one that they teach you is that armbar takedown.
like this, like, and then you,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You sort of you're in that escort position. Let me see if I.
Hmm.
So you're in that escort position
It's
where
like
I
a
have,
2-on-1. It's like
and
a
I just
Russian.
yes. Well, no, it's not even a Russian tie.
Okay.
It's like you're kind of in this escort position, and then you kind of like put the blade of your arm behind their elbow, and
Yeah.
then keep this tight to you, and then just kind of angle that down, right? So it's like
Hmm.
that's your armbar takedown. Which, like, is it effective? Like, maybe, if it like
Maybe. Yeah.
sometimes, sometimes it works,
Uh,
but it's like I would, what I think is more effective is if you're in that escort position, the person starts to, um, whatever, they're trying to pull away or push into you. If you just transition to that, to getting behind them, you're in a great position to get behind this person, throw in a
hmm.
gable grip, and then do some sort of a drop, or some sort of a mat return, even if
Hmm.
you just bump up and then it's just sort of like dip down. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a more effective way of getting the person to the ground.
Certainly, because it's like you are also concerned about that person's safety. It is not like it can't be reckless or wanton for that person.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
But you just you get in enough reps of that,
Hmm.
and it's usually not a problem. As soon as you get some person up into the air and you start to dip them down, as long as you don't have their hands tied in, they put their hands down to brace themselves. Nobody lands on their face on purpose, right?
Hmm.
So you have this automatic cushions kind of built into that for these mat returns.
Yeah. It's a Man, I think I would say grappling has been the most productive change that's ever been in my life. I would say is just going from like a not grappling state of being to a grappling state of being. Like you said, like all the ancillary benefits that it has. Like, I mean, I'm my job in policing. I sit here and I program all day, and then I coach people. Like I don't need grappling for my job. I would imagine if you needed it for your job, though, it would be immensely valuable. Like you would treat every practice, I think, a little bit more seriously. Than someone who's just coming in as a weekend warrior.
So I can speak to this a little. Like I said, I wear a lot of different hats in my position.
Hmm.
One of those hats is that we're going to be training officers on CIT training coming up soon, which is crisis intervention training.
Hmm.
So it's a 40-hour block of instruction where we're basically going to teach officers all about mental illness and how to respond to calls that have some mental health related aspects to them. And there's a block portion within that I've been asked to instruct on de-escalation. So I get the police officers for a few hours to teach them de-escalation, right?
Hmm.
Which could mean whatever. And
Yeah.
I've been given a lot of leeway about like how to teach de-escalation, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to take some things that I learned from being a negotiator. I'm going to pull some things from different places. We're going to have role players. We're going to talk about like, some different stuff. But one thing that I'm not going to harp on this, right? And it's not going to be a jujitsu class. That's not what it's meant to be. But I'm
Hmm.
going to tell them and say, listen, it is what it is. But some of the calmest people that I know, some of the most level-headed people that I know, some of the most articulate people that I know and patient people that I know are grapplers. It's just, it's the nature of the job, because they have that trump card at the end of the day. They have a
Mm-hmm.
level of fitness, and they have a trump card that if things go wrong, they know that they can safely control themselves in the situation, right? And what better thing to have in your back pocket for somebody who's trying to go through this de-escalation thing, right? Where I'm trying to calm you down. Alex is having a hard day. He's all over the place. He's pacing back and forth, and I'm trying to calm you down. At the end of the day, I know if Alex charges me, I have a game plan, right? If
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that sort of game plan, I would feel pretty anxious about trying to de-escalate you, because if it doesn't work, then I'm screwed.
Yeah,
It's like, if it doesn't
it's
work, what
high
am I?
consequence. Yeah.
Yeah, what am I like?
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing now? Like,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna tell these guys and say, listen, just find something,
Mm-hmm.
try to incorporate it into your life. Start training once a week at some place that's convenient near to you. You're
Mm-hmm.
gonna get the health benefits, and you're gonna be better at your job.
Yeah.
I hope you never have to use this stuff, but if you do,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you have it.
Yeah. A wonderful pitch for grappling as a police officer.
Oh, thank you.
Certainly. What would be the short pitch for lifting for a police officer be?
um well, I well, I would just say do something. I mean, I mean,
Yeah.
I think start small.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you went into this and you were like, you got to do starting strength, you got to do a novice linear progression,
Mm-hmm.
like, we're gonna do low bar squats, and you're gonna do the 5-step deadlift, and this is the way it is, and everything else sucks. Like, if you did that to a bunch of cops, like, that is a great way to never hear from them again.
Yeah.
Like, just do something. Like,
Mm-hmm.
anything is better than what we do now, which is just kind of like every man for himself.
Right.
If you were doing CrossFit, great. If you were running 5 days a week, great.
Mm-hmm.
If you're swimming, awesome. Like, I would just like I'm pitching health and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if a person comes to me and they're like, hey, I noticed that you put on like 30 pounds of like, and you look pretty good, and like you're like
Uh,
deadlifting and squatting really heavy, like, I want to do that.
yeah.
If they said that, I would be like, oh, okay, well, starting strength is great. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you should do starting strength. It's a really simple program. Like, you're going to learn how to squat and bench and deadlift and press, and that's what you're going to do. And you're going to do all that until you can't really do it anymore. And then you're going to do intermediate programming, and things get a little bit more complicated, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like super, like, that's what I would tell them. But it's like, but the pitch for strength in general is tough. I think that you should just be pitching like, just do something,
Please
man. Like,
move. Yeah.
please move. Just find
Yeah.
something that you like and do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah. That's always one thing that people are always surprised about if I ever start working them is how kind of like relaxed and then open to more things that I tend to be. Because most people will come from that school of being like, has to be this, has to be that, everything else sucks, get out. And being like, hey, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat here. We got to figure out the way that works best with your life. And I think on the mass scale, like you said, like if you're talking to a room full of 100 cops and you're like, this is the only way to do it, and if you do it any other way, you're wrong, and please leave. It's not going to be. It's
Right.
not going to be super popular pitch. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Like, when you started having me do like high bar squats, I was like, what? This is crazy. Like, I'm doing like, am I going to get thrown out? Like, is Ripco going to show up at my front door
The
and like,
lifting police are going to come. Yeah.
yeah, he's going to tell me I'm out of the club, because I'm
Hmm.
doing high bar squats.
Yeah. It's like, hey, we got your elbow to be concerned about, man.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yep.
man. I think we covered a good bit here. Is there anything else that you wanted to get out there?
I don't know. Well, I don't think so. I mean, I, I've just been super happy with the process.
Hmm.
I started, when I started the starting strength thing, I had tried it a few times, and like I told you at the beginning, and I just couldn't. I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. My form wasn't great. Like, um, and then once I like started working with you, and we sort of like kept at it. I mean, I've just noticed, it's a huge improvement. Like,
Hmm.
I'm stronger than I was. My body is different in a way that is good. That's positive changes for me. Um, I feel like I can even like help out other people a little bit, and sort of like direct people and like how to do a
Hmm.
deadlift and how to do a squat, a bench, and and I have starting strength and you and your coaching to thank for that. So as a system, I think it's a really good system. I think it's a good place to start.
That's great, man. That's good to hear. Yeah, it's interesting the things you'll pick up through osmosis. Because like if we just printed out all of the text logs that we have back and forth, it's like, yeah, you probably have a pretty good eye for a deadlift because we've talked about deadlifting for many thousands of words now.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, yeah, you've watched a lot of your deadlifting videos. Even just the act of going from not taping all of your lifts to taping your lifts and watching them, it's a huge change. It's a huge change for
Oh,
sure.
yeah, but
Mhm.
at the same, speaking to that point, like you critiqued my buddy Tom's deadlift video the other
Yep.
week, right?
Hmm.
And
Who is
and
not a
Tom,
cop? Huge shock.
no, he's not the top officer. No, no, he's a very yeah, he's a very
uh,
smart guy. He's a pediatrician. In any case, Tom and I were joking around about this because you and Chase watched his video, and immediately you guys were laughing about this thing, right? It was like a joke that both of you guys were in on that nobody knew, right? Which
mhm.
was that he was setting up way too far away from the bar, right? Now, I've watched a million of Tom videos too. Like Tom sent me my videos, and when he sent me that video of him doing 405, I was like, dude, that's awesome. So proud of you. That's a great accomplishment.
Mhm.
I didn't look at that and immediately say to myself, like, you are laughably far away from the bar, which is what you guys did, right? So it's like there are nuances
Uh,
to this, there are
yeah.
levels to this, right?
Mhm. Yeah, the willingness to be, discriminatory in your coaching and being really picky about things, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting lift for sure. It's cool though because whenever you do see someone doing that and you're like, "Man, once he figures that out, it's gonna be way easier."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a nice surprise for future Tom. Hopefully, Tom has figured that out at this point. Um, Man, you probably don't want to put your personal Instagram out there into the ether, nor any
Well, it's
contact information. Mm-mm.
it's I mean, it's not very interesting anyways. It's pictures of me going hiking.
Oh, that's so interesting, man.
Yeah,
What
it's just hiking pictures or
is
my
that?
dog.
You or your dog running around? Is that your dog or Chelsea's dog running around in the background?
Wait, well, what did it look like? I have three dogs here now. One's mine, and the other two are Chelsea's. So,
I saw a black dog running around the other day, and I was like, "Oh, whose
okay,
dog is that?"
well, Willie is a lab pit mix. He's a little bit older. He's
Hmm.
black. He's like 11 years old. He's probably not running though. The one you saw was probably Gus, who is an Irish Wolfhound.
That's
Um,
a good dog name.
yeah, yeah. So he was probably running around. And then there's Lennon, who's like a tiny blonde dachshund, long-haired dachshund. So
Nice. You got a whole gang going on there, man.
yeah,
Okay.
that's a lot.
But yeah, okay. Chase is he's still on the show. He's at the seminar this weekend. Phoebe's testing for the seminar. I don't know if you know who Phoebe is, Benny, but hopefully she'll be a coach soon. It's Chase's lady friend. If you want to get videos on the show, we didn't do form checks today, but we have a bunch to go through that we got in last week. If you want to get those in, email that to the support at Strength Club. You can find me on the website and Chase there at that Instagram and his backup account. But I think that's it. All right, see you everybody.